Okay, so we're going to build a website together. By the end of this is what you will have made. So beautiful homepage going on like this. Got a nice fun about page. We're then going to cover a bit of e-commerce. So in here is the product pages. Then we're also going to lightly touch on the scheduling side of things. We'll then build a contact page. And then here's the landing page for the shop. And then you've already seen into those. So that's what we're going to go and make. But let's start from the very beginning. So I've then come into the Squarespace site for templates, and I'm going to then go and use this one. Cool. So here we go. Right, so this is what it starts off, but obviously remember what it's going to go and look like as well. So first things first that I like to go and do is then just go and make the domain unique. So here we can just put this in. That then just makes it our own, so that then it's just easy for us to come and see different client sites, and it doesn't have the random piece of text in there. Next that I like to go and do is then go and put some of the site styles in. So we'll just start with that. Just because then this helps. We've got the font sizes, we've got the colors. We can then helps us to put it all together. So I think we'll stick with that same header. And then in here, so what I can do is then under here, I could just type into search. So we'll go and pick up this one. By default, it comes in at 100, whereas then we can just override this and increase the weight of it. So this is actually this text going on here. Then I can click in and type. I could just drag the slider, but we have that available to you. And actually this one I'll just use with my up arrow. Then let's just come down here. So we'll just make that paragraph 2. I tend to keep either at 1 or 1.1. And then the paragraph 3 really shouldn't set it any smaller than 0.9. Basically, from an accessibility side, that's really the smallest that you ought to set it at. So there's that. Then let's go and have a look at the buttons, and we'll just do the same thing with those. Obviously, I could come in. Yeah, let's just do this. Into here, because we've typed it in, we can then just pick that back up. Let's pull that back to that same 400. And we'll then, we'll just leave that all as is. That's okay. Let's come into the buttons. Let's just get that all set up. So we'll do that. Just set these at a slightly heavier weight. So the higher up the numbers, then the thicker the text goes and gets. And then we just need to apply it to all of the individual ones. So we can do that. But once you set this up once, then it's done. And then if we want to come back and tweak it, we can do. But at least we try and set ourselves up for success at the beginning. So that is the buttons there. Now you might say 700 might be a bit much. Let's just dial that down. No, actually, I think I'm in agreement. Yeah, it probably needs to be about 500 or 600. We'll stick with 6. Great. Okay, so that's the fonts done. And then most of those are following the same. We'll come back if we need to look at any custom stuff. Cool. So that's the fonts in. Now let's have a look at the colors. Okay, so if you're not familiar, then Squarespace works with hex colors. So FF is white. And then let's just drop these in. So we have our light, our slight lightest, then light. We've got a bright color. Then we come into a dark color. And then we'll come into the darkest. So this one I'm actually just going to make slightly off black. So here are our colors, and I like to make sure that they follow the same pattern, because it's then a case of when you use the themes, then making sure that they're actually following the same. This is the darkest one, this is the lightest one, and then anything in between just goes and helps, just following that. Talking of which, here it is, as explained. So we'll come in and we'll tweak some of these just to make them go and work. But yes, that is that one. Let's just quickly now go and have a look at the buttons. So style-wise for the buttons, yeah, quite happy with how that's just come out of the box. Then this one, I'm actually just going to take that outline off. That was that line around the outside. So that looks cool. But then we're just going to do a text transform and just make them all uppercase. So we're going to do that for this particular design. So instead of having to write it all in uppercase, it's just done for us. So we've got that. Other than that, I think I'm fairly happy with it. You then do have the ability to go and tweak and apply the styles to all of these. But because we then just slightly adjusting them, just making sure that we're all happy. This, and then this one. Yeah, that's cool. Great. I might come back around and change that color, but I'll probably do that from... Actually, hold on, let's just do this now. Let's make that a filled version of that. Take the outline off. And then, yeah, I'll come and change it afterwards. That's the buttons done. Then forms looks cool. So the field shape is that pill. So that's that same outline shape here. And then I think I'm happy. I might come back around afterwards. Then miscellaneous. So this is where we can get into different animation types. So this is where the content comes in. So you can see what it's doing, but quite happy with that. Fade. So we'll keep that. And then in terms of the spacing, so then this is where if you do have this set to quite a small number and you start using different font sizes and then moving and adjusting the screen size itself, sometimes the fonts can then slightly decrease when the site gets wider. Slightly weird way of trying to describe it. But what I tend to do is just pull this up. So let's just set this to like, I can just click in 2.5. That site margin is then the gap between the edges of here. So I'll just keep that there for now. You could come and reduce that and it just knocks in. But for this example, we'll just keep going. Then image blocks. So if you're not familiar, then that's a legacy from version 7. So it's there as a backup. But other than that, we'll just hit save. Got all of that in. Okay, so then we talked about setting that third button. So I'm going to come into here, click edit on that color theme. And then I'm just going to come down into the buttons. And then I'm just going to go and have black text on there, and then make that button black. And then I will have the text color as the reverse. So that helps because then we've got our colors in. Now we can start refining the themes and doing that. Obviously, then you can dial in any of these other themes as well. Should you want to come and sort out this text, then you could change this so that it's white text sitting over the top. A little bit fiddly. There we go. So we've got then that shown. So then you can just see, great, that's anything that's got that blue background, then has that white text coming in. And then we'll just go and do this as well. Just so that you can then get a feel of, here's the reality of what it takes to put a site together. A few things are a bit fiddly, but then once we have done this, we've set ourselves up for success. Great, so that's all there done. Okay, so now we've got that in, we're then just going to load some of our assets into the site. So what I'm going to do is just make a folder, and then I'm going to just double click on that, click and drag, drop my folder, my images of my folder. Here is where it comes and uploads. Sometimes if it does throw this little warning message, then if you're happy and you can see it, if you just hit refresh, normally just brings it all back. So here they are, they're all in, so you don't need to worry about that. So there we go, we've got all of these into our site. Now let's start looking at the pages. Also, just to note that this left-hand side, when we're navigating around, might go and change if you're looking at this in the future. So just be mindful of that, but you should be able to get to the same sort of places around. It just might be moved in a slightly different way. If it has got moved and you're trying to track it down, just use this search icon. You can then call this from anywhere around the site, also pressing / or question mark on your keyboard, surfacing that, and then you can just type in search and go and find things. So without further ado, let's dive in. For this, I'm actually not going to use these, so we can just get rid of them. If I have deleted things, it then comes into this trash bin over here. Let's just get that out, and then let's start pulling in our pages. Okay, so let's just go and set this header up. So we've then clicked on a page, clicked up into this edit header, and then we can start to edit this. You can edit this header anywhere on the site. And then let's just edit the design. We'll come into the color and we'll just come and change that to be like then. In terms of the design, so you can come and change the layout of where you have things. These little squares are basically saying that's the pages or links for your navigation. That block equals the button and obviously logo, and you can just move it around, but I'm quite happy with how this goes. Then in terms of other things that we're going to go and do, we'll use this fixed position, which basically means that the top header is then going to stay put, but on scroll back is when it's going to appear. So I'll show you what that function looks like in a moment. Then we'll just slightly increase that size. I think that's pretty good. So we've got that in. Then the elements. So we've got our button that's toggled on. Obviously, if you toggle it off, it goes away. So you've got that. We'll put our social links in. So then once we add them, they will appear here. And because we're doing a store, we'll then add the cart into that. And we're not using these. If you were to use a members area, then you've got that. And if you were to add, let's say, an extension site like Weglot, then you can toggle that on and that starts coming into effect. So got that. Then you can start to click on these individual things and then be able to edit and gain access. So for this cart, for example, I'll change it and we might go for basket. Yeah, let's just go for that little carrier bag. It's quite fun. So I'll do that. And let's keep it quite minimal so we won't have that there. Then we'll start to pull the links in. So then that's where that'll come in. And then actually for this, I'll just do it. So if you were to put a logo in, then you can just upload it here. So you've got that there. But then this site title is primarily getting used from Google search. So then even if you've got a logo in, you want to make sure that's got a lot of information. So for example, if I did have a logo in here, I might make this site title have a few more of the keywords in here. So this sort of thing. And then I could add some extra pieces of information in. But obviously the logo then supersedes all of this. But I'm just going to do that for now. Great. Then let's just pull it in. So we're going to have an about page. We're then going to have books. We're going to have invite me. We're going to have a contact page. Great. And let's just drag and reorder these. Brilliant. So we've got that. And then actually this button at the top here is going to say buy my books. And then we'll remove the link. And then we start all the links with a / to keep it inside of the website. And oh, actually we need the store. So let's just quickly add it here. I'm going to add it in this not linked section. And it's fine. So we're going to add it in the not linked section because I'm happy to not have it in the navigation. The user will find it by clicking on here. And then I'm going to click the site header, click into the button, and then we're going to give it that link. So here we go, store. Fab. So we've got things set. Now, notice that's got that home icon. The way that's come in is it has had this pressed to it. So that is the home. And then it starts off with that as the URL. Now, let's start adding some content. Actually, let's just make our own homepage. Let's start from complete scratch. We need to first swap that over, set as homepage. Then I want to get back that URL. So the way I need to go about that is just by deleting the old one. And then I can use this. Perfect. Now we're going to start building up the page using sections. So first section we have in, edit, get the background image in. Because I've uploaded them already, I can then come in and grab them. So we'll pick this. then we've got what's called a focal point. So the focal point basically just allows you to move the positioning of it relative to the screen size and the device. So the fact that then I can just move and nudge this up here, then obviously brings her into shot. And then on a phone as well, it again nicely brings her into shot. So we've got that. Then I'm going to set the background to be dark, as in the color theme. And then I'm going to just slightly ease that back. So that is adding the color over the top of the image. So we'll just ease that one back. Then we're going to start adding some blocks into the page itself. So first off, let's grab a text block. We'll just do this. This already has that background added to it. Now, the way that happened is by clicking on here, and then you can set highlight, and then that has pulled that in. And then we've set this to be, we've set it to be in italics. The reason being is then we're going to override it using some code that then allows us to target the italics and then change the font. So then you can still use two different fonts inside of the same header. So it's a slight bit of CSS trick that we'll go and do, but that's what we're up to. And then we could just add it as another text box below it, but because I want to have a bit more control over that, I'm just going to drop this in here. And the reason being is that I want to just move that out of the way of the drop of that white. And then I'm going to stick this in our heading that, again, we're just going to put a slightly different font on that as well. So we'll come back to that. Let's just tuck that in here. And then let's just drop a button in. So add button. Then we're going to set that button to be that. Do it like here. And actually, that button should have a white on it. So then this is where we can come into our site styles. You can get to that one of two places. First off, you could come into website tools. Oh, no, it's not there. It's actually back a stage. It's up at here at styles. So that's the first place you could do, or you can click the paintbrush. So for speed, let's just click the paintbrush up here. And then let's come into colors, and we're in darkest one. And then let's just look at that, and we'll set the button to be white. There we go. We can see it change on the page. You could also do things like, often you can then just come and highlight the areas, and then it will just start to change it, as in come and select it. So what I mean by that is I've just clicked into this section, and then it's just summarized what type of blocks it can see in that page. So then it's like, great, I can come in and tweak this because it's relative to what I'm seeing here. Hope that makes sense. Great, so let's just save that, and then let's just come back in to the site itself. So we've got this going on. Then let's work our way down the page. Okay, so coming down the page, we're then going to add a section which is dark, add a text block, I'm going to drop it in the center. And then we're going to make that the 2. Center that up. And then let's highlight that. Do the same style. And then we're actually going to swap that to be black. And then we're going to do add. And then we're just going to leave this waiting for us, because when we come to the store, then we're going to have these in here. So just close up that gap. So we've got 3 that we're putting in, 1 in the center. You saw that gold line appear. That tells us that is in the center itself. We have got 1, 2, and 3. Now the heights of these should come and sort themselves out afterwards, once we come and search and find the blocks. We got various different controls inside of there, so we'll come and circle back round afterwards. So I'm not too fussed as to how that goes and looks. Click and drag that down just to give a little bit more breathing room on that. So that's that one. Then let's add another section. And then in here, we are going to add a title. Here we go. Now, the reason I'm making these all super wide is because when I then, let's just dial that back a bit. When the screen gets smaller, then this text is going to basically grow into that gap. So if you did have it much smaller and the screen started to become like shrinking, it's going to do exactly that, where it starts to wrap. Whereas if you don't do that and just leave that nice and wide, it's got a whole heap of space to move into. Therefore, it's not going to start wrapping, and it's going to be a lot easier. We're going to do something clever here. So we're going to turn off the fill screen, which has then taken away any of that extra gap. And we're going to drop this down, add another section, and then turn that the same color. This will all start to make a bit more sense when it comes to it. And then let's drop our text in here. So this text is going to be header 4. So you can do some quick things on your keyboard as shortcuts. So on a Mac, I can then press Command Options, and then I can press different numbers. So for example, I've just pressed 4, which then gets me to header 3. It slightly goes down the numbers. So header 1 starts at 6 and then comes down. Anyway, it's like a quick shortcut for not having to click that. We'll just duplicate this. So we'll have one over here, one over there. And then we'll just turn this into be italics. And then in terms of that font size, that's all good. And then we'll just do the same thing over here. Then you can see that gold line just tells us that those are the exact same size. And then we can drop the rest of our text in there. And then I'm going to select that text and then just use my keyboard shortcut to do that. So we've got that in there. Then let's just make that small. Do our final section. So our final section, we're going to pick up the bright color. And then this is going to be our little get in touch area. So I'm just going to make that slightly wider, just because it makes it easier when you're going to bring your copy in. Then we're going to do that same vibe. Here is that. We're then going to change the highlight to be white. And then so that's the color of the highlight. And then we need the color of the text. So we're then going to do that and do something like so. Then add a button. Here we go. But we're going to use the solid button for that. And then that's going to say contact. And we're just going to link that using that slash link to the contact page, noting that it does turn that toggle off, which keeps the links, any internal links inside the website. If you were to go outside the website, for example, you had a giving page and you're off to a third-party donation platform, then absolutely turn that on if it doesn't do so already for you. But great, so that's that. Then let's grab an image and we're then going to make this full width, but I then have this extra height. So if I press G on my keyboard, it then shows me the grid and I can see that I've got a big gap going on here. So to get rid of that, you can either do one of two things. You could make it smaller, or if you want to get rid of it completely, toggle that off. So then let's make this edge to edge, but I want to get it over to there. So what I can then do is just drag that. We've done that, but obviously that's then needs to be coming down. So all I've done is just press Shift and clicked on the two items to then pull that in. And then I'm just visually looking and saying 3 here, 3 there. So we've got that all in. And then let's go and find the image. So double click or click on that edit, select from library. And then we'll come and pull that image in, press add. And then because that's not going all the way, what you can do in design is then say, you can do fill. So we've got that in. And actually to make that text stand out, I'm going to swap it here. I could come into that section and say anything in the paragraph 2, go and swap it over. Actually, let's just do that because it's a slightly better approach. So like we found last time, jump here into site styles, come into colors, and then we're in bright 2 as referenced here. And then we can click on that section. So here we go. We have got our medium text that was swapped to be black. And whilst we're here, we may as well just set ourselves up for success and sort that out. Now to show all of them, let's do that. So then we can pick up large, and then we might play around with these. So we can just save that for after. Cool. That's the start of the home page coming together. Actually, let's just drop all of that into the black. Okay, let's just quickly jump back to here, into that bright. And then let's just swap that over. Perfect. You can see that's going to changed. So what we don't want to do is to start having to edit and go over the top of things when you could just pull it together all in one place. Let's give ourselves a footer. So let's do edit section, jump that into a dark. Then we're going to add a newsletter block. Let's do this. Then in terms of the style, get that floating, but then align it over there. Then in the contact, so feel free to name this whatever you like in the future. But we'll go and make our title this. Put some text here. We can just highlight that text to make it bold. And then we'll just take that out for now. So we've got this. Close out the bottom there. So we've got that in. then let's just make this slightly more interesting. So delete that, pull this over to the edge, and then we'll make that text size 3, paragraph, and then hyperlink those. So just to hyperlink, highlight that, and then you can just hyperlink this and type it in. So you could just grab this. And the fact it's got an email address just goes and selects that. And then let's go and put the phone number in. And then it recognizes it's some numbers, so it pops that in. That helps if you're going to, on the phone, just do the keypad and be able to get that all in. Then let's pop some social links. So we'll get these in here. And then at the bottom, we'll just make it super tiny. There we go, making sure that the blue lines don't overlap each other. And then we'll just drop these in. There we go. And then we just hyperlink those to the relevant pages, and we can go and make those in the future. And then what I'm going to actually do is just make that paragraph 3 size. And then I'm actually just going to put that in the center of that box, just so that I know that's sitting nice and neatly in terms of its alignment. Cool. So I'm pretty happy with that. I was just looking here. These initially start feeling quite large in the font sizes. So we're just going to come back round and then just slightly refine these. So just dial this down, fit. Just do that to there. Make that a bit smaller. That's feeling a bit more comfortable. And then quite happy with how that is. Great. Okay. Just save that. That's coming together nicely. Cool. So we've got our home page. And then we'll do some fancy things with this afterwards. But at least we've started to get the content in. And we've done that. Oh, the other thing that we can do, let's just put a little line divide in here. Not the swirly. Let's go for a straight one. But let's then put the thickness there, and we'll change the color to black. So it's really subtle, but it just gives a little point of separation between those two. Just starts to do that. Great, let's move on to the About page. So first off with the About, let's just quickly check that all of these are happy. So we've got all of that, which works nicely. Then the navigation, we're not going to do anything with this by turning and like hiding the header and footer on it. We're happy with the SEO in terms of if you do add in some other pages by some suggested page layouts, then you might find that the SEO title has something in that you just need to delete off. So that's all good. Whilst we're here, we'll just quickly do the same. This all works nicely. We're leaving a hyphen between the two different words. Then that helps things like Google understand the text so that it's not all just merged together. So that's just best practice. Just whilst we're on that, if we did want to do a fast way, copy that, paste it in, and then it highlights, so it takes the space and just puts that dash in there. So the other reason it's good to check this is because let's say I did come in and duplicate this page and it's great. I want this now to be my privacy policy. Then what you just need to do is note that the URL needs swapping. So the fact that you've duplicated it, you then need to copy that over there. So you've got that in there. The same will be exactly true if I'm going to do this for the cookies. policy. Copy that. Now you've got the gist. There we go. Let's look at this about page. So we're going to start off with a blank section. We're then going to bring our text block in, make it a bit wider. And here we go. We'll make this header 1. We'll do that same highlight. There we are. And then we'll just bump this up to be paragraph 1. Super. Then grab an image, tuck that below. Then we've got a nice little portrait image going on here. So then just do select from library. And then we'll go and find this image. And then we'll just drag this taller, change the design to be fill. And then we'll just look at that focal point as well. Okay, that looks cool. Actually, let's just see what other images we have. Yeah, this one. Let's just do that one instead. Cool. That all looks good. Then in terms of the design, just give it some nice curvy corners. The way that we can do it on all corners is if you just add a number here. So I'm just going to put 60 and it does it on all corners. If you wanted it on individual corners, you can just come into here and then you could say, oh, I just want it on like the bottom ones. So it just goes on the bottom. But the fact that we want it on all of them, we'll just come back and we'll just do this. So then we've got that in play. Okay, so let's just give this a bit more height. We're then going to go and add a shape block in. So then this is going to help give us our color separation on the page, and then I'll add our text. So we'll just go and reduce that. Select this, we'll just pull it down, which then gives us room to drop our shape block in. Just drop this in the bottom. And we'll then just add a little bit extra there. Then we'll add our next text. Drop this in here. Here we go. Then we just need to just pop this in and just give it a quick format. So do this, then select those, pop those in bullet points. Just quickly bold that. Same with this, but I'll just go the slightly quicker way on my keyboard with that shortcut that we now know about. And then we'll do bold and italics, and we'll just make that a bit bigger as well. Cool. So then we're going to use the pinning tool. And then what we're going to do is on here, this pin will basically allow, when we start scrolling, for this to stay put with a bit of a gap. And then it has this gap here as well. And then as we scroll, that will stay put whilst we can then start seeing this text. And then, oh, let's close that up. What's gone on here? Let's just get that. Now, you see that there's a massive gap. You could do one of two things. You could drag that up, or if you click edit section, just make this like a really small number, like 5. And then it will just make it the number of rows. So it really isn't 5, it's 43. But that's just a quick way of not having to scroll on there. Anyway, back to pinning. So here we go. We're going to set this offset to be something like 6. Let's just do this. Great. So when we then start to scroll, you can now see that stays put. There we go. But let's just give a bit of a breathing room here. So, okay, here's what we're going to do, a little trick instead. What we're going to do is we're going to add a section, and then we're basically going to create this like fake gap here. So we'll make that small like, and then we're going to get that same shape. So I'm just going to do copy on my keyboard. And then I'm going to paste the shape in here. Let's make this a whole lot smaller. Might have been easier just to add a shape block, but hey, we're here now. Cool. Let's just drag this all the way up. Then let's do that same thing again. Let's just hit 5. Oh, great, even smaller number. And now, there we go. So now we've got our fake section here. Now when we look for our pin, scroll down, it's got that now little gap. We could just close this up. So then we give a natural gap here. So it looks then the same all the way around, as in visually that sort of padding here. Great. That's the start of that. Now let's just put a full width image in. Let's start here. Actually, on the bottom of this, put a quick divider in. Just go for that same line, but do the thickness 1. There we go. Now let's just do edit section, and then go and find an image. Here we go. But that it's got a light color on it, as in because we picked white, it then has this white on here. So I could either remove it, which I could do like that. Yeah, actually, I think that's looking okay, but we'll just set ourselves up for success. So we'll just put it, in case we were to put text over the top, we'll just set it to be that dark. And now I look at it, going to slightly soften any of those like extra white spots here in the image. We've got that in, and let's then leave it. That's cool. Okay, so that's that page now done. Moving on to the books. So we're going to take a similar principle that we did on the about. So here's what we're going to do. We're then going to come into this, we'll hit saved section. So now we've saved that over here. I can come in and reuse this. We'll come into books. We'll then do edit section and then saved and do this. And then we'll just grab our content. Now we don't want the image, but we did want that separator. So let's pop that text in here. And then we'll do a bit more text highlighting. Then we're also just going to drop that into the italics because we'll do a font swap for that. Or then just drop this in here, pop that in bold, and that looks cool. And then instead of the text being here, we're then going to put our image. Actually, I don't think we even need to use that shape, because what we can do in the section itself, we'll just go and change that to this. That's all good. But what we will do, we've turned that off. So that's all fine because we had that for the last setup. So then means we can do our image like this. And then we'll come and select from library, pick our image. And then notice that gap again. So we'll just come into design and do fill. Now let's go and add a button. We'll then do a secondary button. Pop our text in. There we go. We'll just make that slightly wider. And then we'll just drop that. Yep, happy with that in italics. That's all cool. Just make that image sit to the bottom there. Then we're going to repeat the same section. So we're just going to duplicate that section. But what we're going to do is click and shift and swap these all over. And then swap that image over here. And then we're going to change the color background to be that bright color, which then means we need to change that text to be, no, let's not do that. Let's do text color goes to be that. Then what you can't see at the moment is there is a gap between here. You might be able to see that there's a little line. So to make them actually line up, we're going to use this as our gap. There you can see it here, that there's a gap in that section where this image doesn't match up with that. So then if we do this, you can now see that they match up like, which is great. And then we're just going to make our text sit nicely in that box here. Some things go and move around. We need to sort that button color out. So we've got this. Just nudge this down a bit. Bit of natural breathing room. Whilst we're here, let's go and sort that color out. Even if you do set things off correct in the beginning, then you don't always get it right. Clicking into here then shows us here's the secondary button. So we're after the text. So here we go, text color now comes in. We've got that done. Great. And then we're going to do the repeat of this one. So we're going to take that, we're going to use the arrow sections to then go and move it down. So now we're still keeping going with our alternating. And then let's drop our text in. So here's the text. We'll just do this, highlight, background. And then we'll set that to be header 4. Now, the reason that went to be header 4 as well is because there was not necessarily a natural bit like enter between the two things. Let me just go and change this to now be like, but let me just show you how we can almost come ourselves unstuck. So if I did hit delete, then it starts to take on the same font size as the one above. So we'll just have to do this and just be mindful that's as close as you can go and get. So we've got that. This button now is going to say buy now. I'm not going to link it up at the moment because we haven't got our products in there. We can come back to that. And then here is our text. Just close that up a bit. There we go. Great, so that's that page done. Now let's move on to the Invite Me page. Okay, so the invite me page is going to use that same saved section that we did have here. We're actually going to use it this time. And let's come in and swap that out. Here we go. Then we'll do that quick text highlighting. And then we'll just stick that in italics because we're going to do that font change afterwards. Then we'll swap this image. And then we'll just adjust this just to bring it into shot. It's got that same pinning on it, which is cool. Then let's just grab all of this and put our text in. And then we'll just go and format it. So we'll do a bit of this where we put it into paragraph 1, make it bold. Then let's just make these do the same thing. So there we go. Then let's select these text items, put them into the bullet points, and just highlight that. There we go. And then we'll just extend this down. And we're going to add in scheduling. Here is our block, but we need to get it linked up to start with. Just leave that in for the moment. And that normally gets smaller in height, but once it's edited, we'll then get that in place and sort that out. We can do that same tip and technique for this. Let's come back and we'll just come in and do a saved section on that. So here it is. Come back into our site, add section, go and do that. And then, as we said, we'll tidy that up afterwards. Then add a blank section. Let's drop in an image. So we'll have this image in here. Let's then just change that focal point, drop it into this dark color. Then we'll put some text over the top of it, knowing that we'll put it in the center. So that's where that gold line goes and appears. Here we go. That's in header 3. Now this button's going to go solid because it is sitting over the top of an image. We just want to make sure that's going to stand out nice and neatly. So we've got that in there. And then let's just do that. Then the other thing is I'm just going to drag this edge to edge, just again, so that text sits nicely. Clicking inside of this text block, I'm going to change the alignment to be like that. So then it sits neatly in there. Then, actually, let's just come back in here and let's just change the opacity. Just do something like this. Cool. That's that page done. Let's go and have a look at the contact page. So start with a blank section. Go for our light color. Then add our text. So here we go. Got this in here. Just drop that in to be bold. Then we'll drop an image in. That come over this side. pick this one. Then we'll make that fill. Do that same 60 on here. And then we'll just change that focal point just to then bring her slightly more into shot. We'll just pull that a bit taller. And then I'm just going to line this up. So I'm looking at the grid whilst I've got this on my, whilst I've just clicked that. So that then we've got this sitting here. And then we'll put some text either side. So we'll have one piece of text going here. And then we're going to use this expand. There we go. And then let's make that to that font. And then change the text to be like this. Actually, we'll just do, yeah, we'll do that. No, let's do a header. The reason I don't want to pick header 1 is because I don't want to then get in the way of that should be a header 1. But I still want to get creative in the font sizes. So let's do this. And then I'm going to duplicate that block because I'll keep the same styling. And then I'm going to do this. Actually, what you can do is if you can just click and type into it. And then let's just make that a bit more punchy. Great. So we've got this sort of thing going on. Just noting that when you do overlap these, this whole ability to change layers allows you to do things. So you've got that, but these obviously are just sitting over the top. Close out that gap. Then let's add a blank section. Pick the dark color. And then let's just go and add our form. So here we go. Just do that whole text highlighting again. And then we're going to place that in the italics again, just to swap that afterwards. And we'll just put this in bold for that. Then finally, we'll grab a form. We need to sort this out. Let's just check. We're in darkest one. Okay, so we'll come in and swap this over so that that then has the white in there. And then we're going to grab that same section here that we've done. So we'll just heart that. Pop back into contact. And then add saved section. Select that one. Cool. So we've got that there. Let's just sort out that colors. Noting that then anything inside the form then needs to get sorted. So things like the storage, you'd need to swap the email address in. So then in here, this would normally have your default email address. So you just need to swap that out and have that set up for whoever it is appropriate for. But let's go and look at the styling of this. So you can get to this in one of two ways. You could then get to it through the site styles up here. Or we should, yeah, I think we just need to go and do that. Great. So we are in forms. We're going to look at colors. And then we're going to go and select that darkest one. Now that's where the field background, so this is called the field. That's the background. So we then change that to be the white. And then actually these, let's just quickly tweak this whilst we're here. So we'll just make that slightly softer. And I think, yeah, I think that's good. Cool. Okay, so that's then the contact page. Now let's go and look at the shop, or the store, should I say. So by default, we've got a few different products in here. Let's just select all and delete. Then let's go create product. So we're going to make some books. So we're just going to do a physical product. And then just give it a name. We'll give it a description. We're then going to utilize this additional info, because what this is going to do, if I just drop this in here, just show you what this will look like. So we have got this additional info is basically allowed you to do things below the button or the action. So here's the key things you want them to read, do the action, but if they want to know anything extra, drop it in there. So that's that. Then we'll go and add some images. Here we are. We'll have that one, and then we'll pick this one. Great, we'll just set that as the thumbnail. So then on hover, the user will see this one, but that's otherwise the featured. Then what we're going to do is we'll give it some variants first, and then that will help dictate the price, because we're going to have the type. We're going to have a hardback, enter, and a softback, and then save that. Then we're going to put the price for these. So we'll call that 12. We'll call that 10. Great. So then that's put the price in here, and we've got that all set up. Then we'll turn the visibility, that public. Then we will just make sure that the URL is correct. So edit, that is correct. Once you start duplicating things, then this will start to add some extra gobbledygook on the end. Technical term there for you. So that's all happy. Now we've got that in, we'll just come in and add some of the others. We'll do that by just hitting, we'll just hit edit on this again, duplicate this, and then we'll come through and make some more. Okay, so we've got some more added in here. I've just gone and changed the price for that. Then here we go. Here's what I was talking about. So click edit, and then we're going to copy the actual title. So let's just quickly whiz to the top, copy that, whiz to the bottom, a bit quick there, and then paste that in, apply that. So that's then the product title for that one. And then we'll just quickly do the same for our final one. So duplicate that, and then we'll just quickly make that next one. Cool, so I've just made a quick start on that. Remember, we'll copy the product name. Then we'll turn that to be public. We'll then quickly swap this out. And then we'll hit save. Great. Okay, so we have got our 3 products, but I just want to change the order so you can see that there's a little line here and my cursor changes to a hand. So we can do this, or if you had a big long list, you can click and do send to top, send to bottom, and be able to swap the order around like so. So we've got our products in here. Here is our image. We've got this, selecting the different type. We'll then start change the price up here, adding to cart, doing that. That's all good. Obviously, if you want to, you can come in and start editing the design of this page itself, but I'm pretty happy with how that's looking. So next up, we then need to find where we put those product blocks. So here they are on the home page. Then we're just going to go and type in the actual books themselves, just so that we can then get those linked up. So there's that one. So you could do this sort of thing in a couple of different approaches. Here's one approach to be able to do it like this. The alternative is if you wanted to, and see that corrected itself now, it's the same image size. You could, if you wanted to, but not for this design, use a summary block. And then you can select and link that to the store. So you can have all of this. You could then style it in such a way, which then on the design, you could turn off the excerpt. So you could have it looking pretty much the same. In terms of the number of items, then yes, I've got 3 in here and I've got all of that. But the sizing and spacing, so I could just increase slightly. This is the reason I've not decided to use this. The column widths are not always the best. And also that when it changes screen size, then I might just want to slightly reorder the page. So for example, when this changes screen size onto mobile, then it stacks it in just one big list here. But for mine, I'm actually just going to make these smaller. And then I have way more control over it. Obviously, if I have 4, then I can just fill that gap, but it then saves it from being quite so massive. Anyway, personal preference, you've got that available to you. So let's, for this example, just get rid of that. And we'll put this in. Great, so those are linked up. We've done our store. Now we just need to do the scheduling. So let's come into scheduling here. So for this, we'll just quickly do a couple of appointment types. So we'll just override this. We'll say the appointment type is book club. And that's going to last 1 hour. It's going to have no charge to it. You just turn up and we'll pick like a purpley color for that. And we'll do this. So that's one. Actually, no, it's not for 10 hours. It's for 1 hour. There we go. Great. Let's just duplicate that and we'll have the next one. I'll just do this. This one we'll do for 90 minutes as well. And we'll then pick a custom color. This is the hex color value. Just starts with a hashtag on the front. So we'll do that, make it public. And then that's all good. I'll just put that same color into here as well. There we go, just for consistency. Great, so we've got those in here. Now let's just jump back to our page. And on the about, no, it was the invite me page. Here is our scheduling. If we double click this, now it will link up to what we're after. So we've got that in there. We can obviously do any customizing inside of that, but we're looking at all public appointments. You could make it more hidden, but that's all fine for now. And then let's just drop this background, close up that gap, drop this background in. That's all fine. Just need to close that gap up. Get it nice and tight. That's fine. So we can't go any shorter than that. Save. Brilliant. Okay. So we have got all of the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle in there now. The only other things that we're going to go and do is to do some of that styling. So what it means is then we're going to slightly tweak some of the actual fonts themselves and be able to do that whole ability to change some fonts and then change the way that things go and look. Let's have a look here. Let's go into Website Tools, Custom CSS, and then I'm just going to drop in this piece of code. Now, you can immediately see that it's changed the text here, but what it's actually doing is it's saying, go and look at headers 1, 2, and 3, and then it's saying, go and apply a certain size to it and font weight based on the screen size being a minimum width of 640. So that's more around the minimum being mobile, but you could decide just to take that out, which then says, there we go. So it then says anything that's in headers 1, 2, and 3. And then EM means italics. So then in italics and make it this font family. So we're using the other font family that we had in the system that we're using for the paragraph text. Then go and make the font weight 600. So remember we saw that in the fonts. Look, if we change it to 100, it goes and swaps it like so. Do that. And then we have got, when you're using the italics anywhere else, then just make it normal. So you can then still keep using the italics elsewhere around the site. But when we're just using it like that, then go and tweak and change it. So that is the site that we have gone and built. So let's just have a quick look back at the work that we've gone and done. So here we go. Here's the home page. Here's where we have got all of this coming in. Then we have got our about page. Got that with our nice pinned block. A little line divide. And here's the books. Looking all smart. Actually, what we could do is we can just link up these books. So it's quite nice when we're just going back around the site to then say, great, let's go to the whispering. That's the whispering one. Oh, we need to change that text over there. Let's just quickly do that. Because we just duplicated it. There we go. So we do something like this. Drop that in to that. Change that to be white. And then remember, if we then suddenly put that in italics, that piece of code then goes and swap that over. Let's drop that into bold. And let's make that a bit bigger. Then this will be by now. And then we're looking at echoes / for the internal link, echo. Perfect. And then let's just grab a different quote. Great. And then this one. Here we go. So then this is the thread. Very nice. Cool. So now let's just keep going back. This is now looking smart. Here's our pinned block. Here's this coming in. Here's our little save section. Contact. We've got this going in. And then we have that linked to our store, which we did need to put a top banner in. So let's actually finish that off because that was the final piece of the puzzle. Which is great whilst we're looking around to make sure that just need to get everything all in. So we'll get rid of that section. Let's add a blank section. And actually, we're going to style this the same as we have done the contact page. Right, so let's just do this, save that section, so we can then take the style. Then here's our store. Come into here, remove that, add section, saved, click that one, and then let's just pop this text in here, bump that up, do the whole italics now that you're familiar with that, do this, it's probably all coming second nature to you now, make that a bit bigger into paragraph 1 and make it a bit bold. Change this, so maybe you can type into it. Can do something like that. Cool. So that's the start of that page. Then in terms of here, we'll just make that columns 3. So we've got this, then we'll change the background to be dark. And then that's that featured one, and on hover you see the secondary image. So we've got that in there. Then actually let's just get rid of this and that. And then we will add our saved section in here. Now the final thing, we went and checked all of the pages for this, but this one we needed to add in from here. So we just need to check that we're happy. Store, it's all good. Then let's look. We didn't add any categories, that's fine. SEO, here we go. Let's just get rid of that. So then it makes our store say the correct thing in the page title. That's all looking nice and neat. Fantastic. There we go. Top to bottom, full site build for you to watch along. And hopefully you've enjoyed that and have learnt along the way. Obviously, we could do mobile as a layout that we could come and do another time and do that. The final thing, if I didn't show you, is how to add in the social links. So that as a final thing, let's just press search and use that function. So here we go, social links. Then this is where you come and add in all of these. Noting with Twitter that if you did just go and change that URL to say x.com and hit save, notice that it should swap it from the bird to be the X itself. So let's just pop that in here. There we go. And then we can drag and reorder things. Close on that. It swaps it up here. And we've got all of that in place. And then we use it down the bottom. And again, it follows that same order. So there we go. Site-wide, top to bottom, building a whole site.